So today, we're making something to give away. Stay tuned. Hi guys, so for those of you that don't know, my name is Michael and I am the woodworker for MKDesigns. Oh my God, you guys have been amazing. As we speak, as I'm sitting here recording this, let me look it up. We are sitting at, you think I already had this pulled up, right? We are sitting at 209 subscribers, from 93 to 200 before I started that live with James. This last few, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, today's Tuesday, so the last 3 days have been amazing. On Sunday, when I woke up and I saw how many subscribers I had, I immediately started working. As soon as I stopped the video that you guys have already seen and I've already published, I immediately started working. I got out here and I started cutting down and milling the maple and got it all put together. And so without any further ado, here they are. Here's the boxes, and someone is going to be getting one of these. Hang on. So this one right here is my favorite one. This one came out amazing. You see how it shines right there. That's from the curly maple. That's not from the lacquer, believe it or not. And then the lid has that on it. Looks like an eye. That's kind of what Kat said it was anyway. She kept calling it the one with the eye. So, but here's the top. And I'll give you a panned out zoom here in just a second of both boxes, but that's one of them. And the other one, here's the other one. These things turned out gorgeous, guys. And whoever gets it is gonna just love it. I know, and you're gonna be very lucky. So let me turn the camera around, do a quick broad view of the boxes, and we'll get to the build. Broad view of the boxes so you can get an idea of what they actually look like. And so yeah, there they are, and let's get to it. Okay, so obviously the first thing I have to do is I have to get a rough measurement on the boards that I'm going to be cutting for the boxes. And I got 2 of these curly maple boards, and I'm hoping to be able to get 2 boxes out of one of them, because I'd like to use the other one to make something special for my son who's graduating from basic next month. And as it turned out, I was able to get 2 boxes out of this one board, and it all worked out for the best. So once I got my rough measurements, then I'm going to cross cut them down to rough length. And now that I have them cut down to rough length, I'm going to take them to the joiner and start cleaning them up. And yes, that's a piece of pine, and that'll come into play in just a few minutes, and you'll see what I'm using that for. But I'm going to mill it at the same time that I'm milling the maple down. And then once I have one face cleaned up, I'm going to take it and I'm going to clean up one edge, and then I'll start running it through the planer. So I'm going to run it through the planer to clean up the other face and get it down to the thickness that I'm looking for. And once I'm done with that, I'm going to take it back over to the table saw, and I'm going to rip both pieces down to my exact width. After that, I'm going to put my cross-cut sled back on the saw, and I'm going to start cross-cutting it. The first step is to get one clean edge to register against. And I'm going to mark each one of my pieces so I know which piece goes with which box. And I'm going to cross cut to exact length. Now comes the fun part. We get to cut dovetails. The first step is obviously to lay out your pieces and then cut your tails. So as far as what the pine was for, you can see it sitting on the top of the jig there. It's a sacrificial piece to allow for the through dovetail cuts. It just keeps your board from tearing out and helps with alignment to make sure everything lines up properly. So once I cut all my tails out of all 4 pieces for both boxes, 2 for each box, then I switch my jig around and I start cutting the pins. Okay, so once I cut the pins on the first edge, then I will take one of my tail pieces and I will check the fit. And in this case, it turned out to be a little too tight, so I will adjust the jig and start cutting them again. And it's okay to do this unless you cut them too big. If you cut them too big, then you might have to figure something else out. And I'll keep doing this, adjusting the jig a little bit at a time until I get a perfect snug fit, and then I'll just start cutting the rest of my pins. At that point, I won't have to make any more adjustments to the jig. This should all fit perfectly fine. So as you can see, a nice perfect snug fit. A lot of people will run test pieces in there first to make sure that everything cuts, but with this Porter cable jig, that I found that's not necessary. James King has said it several times, and I'm here to back him up on it. With the Porter cable jig, you don't have to do that. I just put my production pieces in and cut away. Everything usually works out great. And so before I glue the boxes together, I want to go ahead and sand the inside, because once they're together, it'll be kind of hard to sand them. So I'm going to start with 80 grit and sand it down, then I'll move up to 100, then 150, and I'll stop there for the moment. Okay, and so for the glue up, I'm going to do it one box at a time. So I'm going to lay out my pieces the way I want them put together, and then I'm going to start gluing. And I'm going to glue both surfaces, and I'm going to use a little more glue than I probably should, but I just want to make sure that the glue joint doesn't fail on me at all. And once I have all four corners glued, then I'm going to check it for square and start clamping it up, checking it for square the whole time. And I'm just going to get it clamped good and tight and let it dry. So while the boxes are drying, I'm gonna measure out for the Paduke for the top and the bottom and get it worked. Okay, so again, the first thing I need to do is cut it down to rough length. Okay, so here's where it's going to differ from how I did the maple. My joiner is 6 inches wide, and the boards that I have are almost 7 inches wide. So I need to actually cut them to width before I run them over my joiner. So what I'm doing is I'm getting one clean edge to be able to register against my fence so that I can rip them down to width. And so I'll take them over to the table saw, and I'll use that edge I just ran across the joiner and put it against my fence and rip them down to exact width. And after that, I'll take them back to the joiner and I'll clean up the face. And now we're at the planer to run them through and clean up the other face and get them down to thickness. And now we get them cut to exact length. Again, cutting off the edge to get a straight edge to register against, slide it over to the stop, and cut our exact length. And so here's a little preview of what they look like at this point out of the clamps. Okay, so now we need to cut rabbets to make them fit. Now there's several ways to do this, and I'm going to demonstrate 2 different ways. I'm going to use the router on the bottoms, and I'm going to use a table saw on the lids. And basically I have this adjustable router bit, comes with different bearings to be able to make different size rabbets with, and that's how I'm going to cut the rabbet for the bottoms, is with the router table and this bit. So I'm just going to go slow and work around the edge and just be extremely careful. So as you can see, one of the downsides is with using the routers, it doesn't quite fit even though it should, and so I have to do a little bit of work. That's the smallest bearing I have, so I can't make the rabbet any bigger than it already is. So I'm just going to use a card scraper and scrape along and clean it up a little bit. One of the things that I don't like about this router table is no matter how many times I level out the insert plate for the router, it always becomes uneven somehow. Whenever I'm routing something, I usually wind up with a little lip, and it's like a 32nd to a 16th of an inch. It's nothing big, but it's something I always have to clean up. So while I'm making the rabbet a little bit wider, I'm also cleaning up that little bit from the router table. So I apologize, I got in the way of the camera here, but basically I'm going to take a chisel, and on the end grain I'm going to use that to clean up the rabbet. And just a little bit of work and it fits beautifully. And before I glue the bottom in, I'm going to go ahead and sand the dovetails flush. They were a little proud, which is the way I designed it, so that I could sand them down and get everything flush. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and sand the inside of the bottom, because again, once I get everything glued together, it's going to be hard to sand. And the reason I'm doing this after I sand the outside of the box is I wanted to use the same sanding pad, and a lot of times when you sand Paduke, you'll take that red and you'll transfer it to a lighter wood like the maple. Okay, and the last step before I glue the bottom on is I'm going to go ahead and sand the top and the bottom of the box. I'm going to go ahead and do the top at the same time just so I get it out of the way. I've got 100 grit sandpaper just basically glued down to a piece of plywood. Clamp that to my table and run the box across it. That way I can make sure it gets evenly sanded all the way across. And now it's time to glue on the bottom. So Padauk is an exotic wood, and exotic woods have a lot of oil in them, so before you do a glue up you want to wipe it down with acetone wherever you're going to put glue at in order to ensure that you get a good bond. So I'm going to wipe the rabbet down with some acetone, and then I'm going to apply glue to the bottom of the box as well as the rabbet and put it together and clamp it down. Okay, so now I'm going to start working on the top. So I've swapped out my dado blade and I've swapped out my insert on my crosscut sled for my dado insert, and I'm going to set my depth for my rabbet and cut the rabbet with the dado blade. The major advantage to doing it this way is that I can test the fit, and then I can just move everything over just slightly and cut the rabbet just a little bit bigger, and I can get it to fit that way. I can sneak up on my fit with the table saw. Okay, so I come over and I test the fit. Hear that little bit of wiggle? That's what I'm looking for. Okay, so we're back over at the router table, and this time I have the biggest bearing on my bit that I can get, and it basically turns it into a flush trim bit. And all I'm doing is taking it around and I'm trying to get the top and the bottom completely flush with the box itself. I'm using the blue tape to help hold the top in place to keep it from moving around on me, and I'll just do one side, then I'll put a piece of tape, then I'll take tape off the next side and just continue around that way. And obviously, because the bottom is glued in, I don't have to use the tape on it. Okay, so now for my accents on the lid. What I do is I set my miter gauge at 45 degrees, and I set my fence at about 1 inch, and I just raise my dado blade up about 1/8 of an inch, and I just make several passes and get the notch on it like that. Now here's the thing, if you're not comfortable making this kind of cut, don't. Any kind of cut you go to make on a table saw or a router or anything, if you're not comfortable with it, if it makes you nervous, don't do it. Find another way to make it. I've done this a few times and I feel comfortable with it. And to cut the corners on the other side, I just rotate my miter gauge to the 45 degrees the other direction and cut those. And one more time back at the router table. This time I'm going to cut a chamfer on the top of the box, and then I'll bring the lid over and I'll cut a chamfer on the edge of it, and I should be done with the router table if I remember right at that point. And now I'm going to cut the accent pieces out of yellow heart. And basically I take the piece of yellow heart over and use the notches in the lid to actually mark it and then I'll just bring it over to the bandsaw and cut them out. And I cut them a little oversized so that way I can sand them flush at the end. So before I glue them on, I'm going to take a little piece of 80 grit sandpaper and just sand down the notches to get rid of the marks from the dado blade and make sure everything sits flat. Okay, so once again, whenever you're working with exotics and you go to glue up, you need to wipe it down with acetone to get rid of the oils so that the glue has a good surface to bond to. Both the Yellow Heart and the Padauk are exotics, so I need to wipe them both down and then I can glue them up. And interesting side note, if you're working on wood and you get a pencil mark somewhere that you don't want it, but you don't want to sand it to get it off, and an eraser won't quite get it all the way off, acetone erases graphite. I did not know that. I found that out on this build. Again, put glue on both surfaces, put it together, and then clamp them down. Just a quick picture to show you what they're looking like at this point. And now it's time to start the final sanding. I am using the clamps to hold the lid in place, so that while I do this I can make sure everything comes out flush. And I'm going to start with 80 grit, and I'm going to first work the edges of the Yellow Heart to get it flush with the lid, and then I'll sand the lid and the bottom completely flush, just in case the flush trim bit missed a bit here or there. And as I'm doing this, you'll notice that a little bit of the Padauk gets on the maple, but I wipe everything down with mineral spirits before I move on to the next side, and that takes care of it. And I'll step up, and once I'm done with the 80 and I go all the way around the box, then I'll step up to 100 and then 150. Once I've sanded around all the way around the box, hey look, I found a use for a carpenter pencil in fine woodworking. Anyway, once I've sanded all the way around the box, I can then start sanding the lid and the bottom. And the reason I'm marking it up like this is it helps me know when I've sanded enough, and helps me make sure I keep everything flat as I'm sanding it. But again, I'll start with 80 grit, then I'll move to 100, then 150. And again, I'll start with the corners of the Yellow Heart and get them sanded down flush with the top, and then move on from there. And then I'll do the same thing on the bottoms. And now we're on to the hand sanding. And I'm going to start with the chamfers, and again I'm going to use 80 and move up to 100, then 150. And I'm mainly doing this because to get rid of the burn marks, and if the chamfer bit chipped out anything, to get everything sanded smooth. And then I'll do the same thing on the chamfers on the lids. Okay, and once I'm done with the 150 and I'm done with the sanding block, I will use that same 150 grit piece of sandpaper, and I will take it and I will start rounding over all the sharp corners. And you can see a little bit of the Padauk got on the maple there, but it'll come off. But yeah, I'm just gonna take this and I'm gonna break all the corners and get them to where they're not quite so sharp, and then the next step. Okay, so for my last step, what I'm going to do is I have this 6-inch 220 grit sanding disc for my 6-inch random orbit sander, but my random orbit sander quit working on me a while back, and I've got all these discs I need to use. I'll probably eventually replace it, but right now I just have all these discs I need to use. And so I'm going to take one of the discs and I'm going to do a quick hand sand with 220 around the whole box, and that's it for the sanding. We're finally moving on to finishing. So the first step to finishing is I need to get rid of all the extra sawdust and clean up so that I can keep it out of my finish. The next step is I'm going to wipe down both boxes in its entirety, inside and out, and both lids with mineral spirits, just to make sure I've gotten all the dust off of everything before I start applying the lacquer. And here you can see how gorgeous this is going to be when it's finished. And for the finish, I'm using Deft, D-E-F-T, gloss lacquer. And because it's a brushing lacquer, and I don't have the correct nozzle to be able to use it full strength, I have to thin it down a little bit. But it goes on, works just fine. I may have to put on a few more coats than I normally would, but that's okay. So I'm going to wind up putting on about a total of 6 coats, and starting on the 3rd coat, I'm going to be sanding with 400 grit sandpaper between each coat. The reason I don't do it after the first one or the second one, or after the first one, is because I have had it a lot of times, it will actually spread the Paduke to the maple, and at that point it's almost impossible to get off. You have to completely sand it down and start over with your finish. So I will start with my 3rd coat, and I will sand with 400 grit between each coat, and then after the 6th coat I will let it completely dry, and then I will take a light sanding to it of 1500 grit, and then I'll wipe that down with a cloth or a tack cloth, and it's as smooth as glass at that point. And here they are, all finished and ready to go. You can hear Kat speaking a little bit at the beginning of this part, and only because she didn't realize I was recording, but as soon as she realized I was recording, she stopped talking.
Nothing, honey. You're beautiful. Okay. Alright, guys. So, yeah, that's the build. For those of you that haven't met her yet, this is Kat, my lovely wife.
Hello.
She's the sewer of MKDesigns. She may not speak much. She's kind of camera shy. But, and the reason she's so much shorter than me is because her chair is shorter than mine. And we didn't think about that, and she doesn't like this chair. So, yeah. Alright, so, yeah, that's the build. Like I said, you guys are awesome. You really are. And in order to show you guys how awesome you really are, I'm not giving away one of these boxes. I'm giving them both away. Because we hit over 200 subscribers before I recorded this part of the video, I am giving both boxes away. And yeah, so I can't show my appreciation to you guys any better than that at the moment, but trust me, if I come up with a better way, I'll do it. So, okay, so this is the rules for entering the competition in order to win one of these 2 boxes. The first, you get a chance to get 5 entries. The first chance is going to be you need to make a comment on this video with the hashtag MKDesigns. Put a comment on this video with hashtag MKDesigns, and that's 1 entry. The next entry is go over to Facebook and like our Facebook page. That's number 2. And I'll put a link to all this down in the bottom, our Facebook page, our Twitter, Instagram, all of that, down in the description of this so that you can go over and click on it. But yeah, go over to Facebook and like our page. Third is follow us on Twitter. Go over to Twitter, click on follow. That's number 3. Okay? Number 4, follow us on Instagram. Go over to Instagram, click the button, and follow us. That's 4. And 5th entry is going to be share a tweet. Share the tweet of this video. It's every day when I publish these, every time when I publish a video, I share it on Twitter and it goes out as a tweet. And if you just click on share the tweet, then it'll tell me that you shared it, and that'll give you a 5th entry. So make a comment on this video with hashtag MKDesigns. Go over to Facebook and like our page. Go to Twitter and follow us on Twitter. Go to Instagram, follow us on Instagram, and tweet the share the tweet on this video. So those are the 5 entries. All right, the deadline to enter is going to be July 26th at 11:59 p.m. At midnight on July 27th, no more. It doesn't count. So yeah, July 26th at 11:59 p.m. And then for the announcement of who wins, we have something extremely special planned for you guys. We are going to do a live session on Friday, July 27th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. That time is subject to change, so don't quote me on that just yet. But the live session is going to be the 2 of us, James King, Shogun-Jimi, Shaun Smithson of Smithson Creations, and Mel Morris, and possibly JP Brown. Those guys have been a tremendous support and help getting me going with this. And I want to do the live session just so that we can all get together. And then most likely what we're going to do is we're going to have everybody's name in one of these boxes. Maybe both. Who knows? We'll put a group of names in one box. We'll put a group of names in another box. And we'll have Kat pick who wins. She's going to draw blind who wins the box. So, okay, one more time just to recap. 5 entries. Make a comment on this video using the hashtag MKDesigns. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Instagram. And retweet the tweet of this video. Deadline to enter is July 26th at 11:59 p.m. And the announcement will be a live video with myself, Kat, James King, Shaun Smithson, Shogun-Jimi, Mel Morris, and JP Brown. Possibly JP Brown. On July 27th at 6 p.m. Mountain. That's 4 p.m. 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, and 5 p.m. Pacific. So, if you guys have any other questions, put a different comment down below. If this is your first time visiting our channel, please click on the subscribe button. We'd love to have you and keep us growing. Our next giveaway is going to be at 500 subscribers. Be sure to hit that little bell next to it just so you get notified whenever I come out with a new video. And yeah, until next time, guys, happy creating.